Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Neve once again. Thank you so much for being here. Ladies and gentlemen, we move on to the Neve Fest. Changing times, changing values. Today we have with us the best-selling, award-winning author and educator, Rene Watson, Ashim Ahluwalia, the award-winning author, Jane D'Souza, and the anthropologist and author, Dhooleka Raj, on the pressures that young people face today and the ways in which they may navigate these positively. Rene Watson is a #1 New York Times best-selling author of books for young readers. Her books have sold over 1 million copies. Her young adult novel, Piecing Me Together, received a Coretta Scott King Award and a Newbery Honor. Her children's picture books and novels for teens have received several awards and international recognition. Many of her books are inspired by her experiences growing up as a black girl in the Pacific Northwest. Her poetry and fiction center around experiences of black girls and explore themes of home, identity, body image, and the intersections of race, class, and gender. Ladies and gentlemen, Neve welcomes Rene Watson, please. Ashim Ahluwalia is a writer, director, and producer. His debut, John and Jane, premiered at the Toronto and Berlin film festivals and was HBO's film's first Indian release. Miss Lovely was an official selection of the Cannes Film Festival, followed by Daddy, a biopic on gangster Arun Gavli featuring Arjun Rampal and Farhan Akhtar. His latest series is The Class, which explores wealth disparity and social dynamics in an elite new LA school. Ashim was named as one of the 10 best emerging film directors by Fadden Press in Take 100, the future of the film, and is the only Indian filmmaker to have films premiere in the official selections of Cannes, Berlin, Venice, Toronto, and Essex SW festivals. Ladies and gentlemen, Ashim Ahluwalia for Neve. Thank you so much, sir, for being here. Jane D'Souza is an award-winning author and creative consultant. She writes funny books about deep issues and has been published worldwide. Among others are the Midnight Years on young adult health, Flyaway Boy on stereotyping children, and When the World Went Dark, globally titled Impossible Happens, the winner of last year's Neve Book Award. Jane is a management graduate and creative director. She has worked on an app, a film, and has 2 columns which ran a total of 8 years. She currently lives in Singapore. Ladies and gentlemen, all the Nevites, put your hands together for Jane D'Souza. Moving on, Dr. Dhooleka Raj is an anthropologist from Cambridge University and is the author of Where Are You From? And Middle-Class Migrants in the Modern World, which has been published by the University of California. Her research addresses migrant mobilities, global citizenship, and belonging. Dr. Raj has served as an associate chair of the South Asian Studies at Yale and held fellowships at Harvard and the Cambridge universities. A global nomad, Dr. Raj has lived in Tokyo, Sydney, London, New York, Dubai, and Bangkok. A reading advocate in 5 international schools across 3 continents. She has been on the Neve Book Award jury since its inception and served as the co-chair in 2020 and in 2021. Dr. Raj is passionate about poetry and is deeply interested and has published books on the Indian partition. Ladies and gentlemen, all the Nevites put together for Dr. Dhooleka Raj. Thank you so much. We move on to the panelists. Changing times, changing values. Rene Watson, Ashim Ahluwalia, Jane D'Souza, and Dr. Dhooleka Raj. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the warm introductions. I'm delighted to be on this panel. We have a superstar panel in front of you. No pressure on either, one of you to say what you want to say. New York Times bestseller, Cannes nominee, and an award-winning author. It doesn't get better than this on a Saturday morning, folks. So I wanted to come down to what we're talking about, changing times, changing values. This is something that I know in my own family we're also dealing with. I have 2 teenage kids, and it's something that we are all constantly, I think as parents, always wondering, well, I am anyway, are we doing the best we can for our kids? Sometimes we have this idea that, we want to take the kids in this direction or that direction or encourage them in certain ways. But in other times, it's very difficult to be a parent nowadays, I would say. I think each of these authors and filmmaker that we have on stage has a lot that we can learn from as parents and as educators. So I turn it over to them and would like to just start off with the question to Jane to really get us starting about what is the pressures that you see on teens today?
Thanks, Dhooleka. So there are so many, but if I had to choose just one, the main one, I'd say it's a question of identity. Okay, so young adulthood is when they try to frame their own identity, right? Who I am in this big world. And never before, no generation before, has it been so difficult because it's like they're growing up in a glass bubble. So the gaze is from outside in, and they're trying to fit into someone else's expectation of what they should be. So each one needs to be a social media star. Each one needs to be, living up to the expectations of what their parents and their families have. So I think the dichotomy comes from there. That I feel is the largest challenge. Done.
Can I turn that same question over to our other panelists? Rene, Ashim, would you like to help us understand what are the pressures on teens today?
Sure. So hello, everyone. Thank you all for having me. Thanks to the festival for the invitation. I think right now young people are holding a lot and maybe don't know where they can rest. So they're holding their own fears, the normal anxiety of being a child, trying to figure, well, who do I want to be when I'm older? How do I please my parents? How do I pass my class? There's all of that. And we all just went through something very traumatic together. We just went through a pandemic and the loss and the grief and the stress of the unknown. So I think our young people are holding some unsaid things because we've kind of just moved on. And I don't know that we've actually checked in with young people to say, how are you and what do you think and how are you feeling about what has just happened in our world? So I think they're holding all of that.
I appreciate that a lot. And I'm going to just stop us for 1 second and take a quick poll of parents and educators in the room. How many of you have done this, what she just said? How are you? Ask the kids, how are you? Is everything okay? Yeah, not too many. Enough. The brave souls are there enough. That's very interesting. Thank you. Ashim.
I think most of it has been covered. I just feel, extending what Jane's saying, and I think what all of us are saying, this idea of, should I use that one? Just this idea of kids having to navigate, which I think is really insane, the real and the virtual, this idea of where is your body and where is your mind, and the fact that you're separated, right? So, we might take for granted what it means for a kid to just look at Instagram and then be in a room, but actually they're in 2 different places at once. And I think that actual, that's something we've never seen as a human species before. So I think it's quite a big shift in our way of perceiving the world,
So the pressures on teens are tremendous, right? We're post-pandemic. They've got a lot of pressures coming on them from schools and expectations, as Jane said, and these social media pressures that are really thinking about being in two places at once, you know, simultaneously here and there. I think I'd like to turn to something that goes a little more in depth now into what you just raised, Ashim. What is the portrayal of teens on stage or in books or on film? Is there a lack of realistic portrayal of teen lives in books and media? And I guess, because you were all crafting lives on stage, right, for performance, how can one craft a truthful portrayal of teenage existence in societies where many of these topics are considered taboo? So, like, how can you as filmmakers and writers, creative people, cleverly try to weave taboo subjects and nuanced representations into what we receive as your products, your media, that would help to spark deeper conversations amongst the parents and educators who are here today? I'm going to ask Ashim to start with that because you've got class that's come out.
Yeah, so I can just speak for myself. I'm not a YA specialist, but I did make a show called Class, which is about young people today and, class in terms of a wealthy school, an elite school, which has a couple of scholarship kids that come in, and it was, to put it mildly, very difficult for me to convince Netflix to allow me to do what I wanted to do, which was essentially represent some of the difficult and maybe perhaps dysfunctional aspects of youth. And so there was this definite pushback that, well, we can't go there, audiences won't like this, parents won't like this is going to become controversial, etc., etc. And it deals with a lot of things. It deals with sex, drugs, all kinds of things, gender identity, a lot of stuff that we've never actually dealt with in India for sure, and definitely not on film or in any kind of moving image way. So I think for me, I think it was absolutely necessary. I have a 14-year-old girl myself, and I just feel there's nothing that reflects back what's really happening. And I think this collective state of denial is really problematic in terms of how it allows us to just pretend and go on with our days without asking, how are you? Really, I think that's where I'm coming from a bit.
So I think that when you don't have someone saying to you, what you're feeling is normal, and what you're seeing is actually happening, it makes you feel like you're the only one, and you feel isolated in those feelings of, is anybody else as angry as I am? Is anyone else as sad? Is anyone else afraid? Is anybody else in love, right? They're not all hard questions. Some of these questions are also hopeful and joyful too. And our young people are complex just like we are. And I think sometimes we forget that as adults, that in the same way that we are feeling the joys and the sorrows and the hardships of life, so are our young people, and they have not been here as long. So they don't have the coping skills that maybe, hopefully, we have. And so I think it's when I'm coming to the page as a writer, I want to show them ways of coping, and I want to offer characters who are struggling with those same issues, asking those hard questions, and who hopefully are dealing with them in some kind of positive way, so that young people can see a reflection, not just in that way of how we talk about diversity, where you see yourself reflected maybe by race or gender, but circumstance, the feelings of loneliness, sadness, all those things. How are characters handling that? And here are some ways for maybe you to try out too. So yeah, that's what I'm thinking about when I come to my work, keeping in mind all the things that have helped me as a young person and the young people that I know.
That's really helpful. I think having hope is very important also in the work, that, and a way for us as readers to consume, to understand that we're not alone when we're facing these, and to see that there's a possibility to come out of it somehow, which I think each of your works does in different ways, and you're all handling very difficult kind of topics. And I want to ask Jane, because in Jane's work there's a lot of different aspects that come in, whether it be bulimia or class differences or the ways that families are navigating what adolescents are going to or interacting with them. Jane.
I keep coming onto stage at List Fest and I keep saying the same thing. Along with the books that you all of us rather, we all give our kids on inspiring them, okay? The 100 or the 50 great people, the amazing people who did in science or in literature or in blah, blah, blah. We are putting some kind of subconscious expectation. We're setting some. So along with that, let's give our children books or let them choose the books which talk about real people, talk about real children, real youngsters who are going through struggles, as Rene put it. Let's do that, or show them the films, let them watch films which also reflects themselves. That's my answer to your question. We need more real portrayals, we need more real people, and we need to buy those books, okay? We just don't need to write them.
Can I add something? I think too, we are in this room right now, and it's already happened, even with me being up here looking out at all of you. There's a moment in a room when something happens. It could be funny or it could be really awkward, and you find the person that saw it too, and you just look at them like, did you just see what is happening in here? Or you both laugh and kind of smile at each other. And I think that's what we're trying to do with our art, with our films and our books. We want young people to get that glance in the text where a character is saying, yeah, I saw it, it's happening, I see you, we're in this together. There are a lot of people who are feeling and seeing the same thing. And we don't have to be in denial about that, but here are some ways to talk about it and to bear witness to each other. Even if we're not solving anything, I think as teacher, I'm an educator, and sometimes I want to know, I want to have all the answers for my young people when they're asking questions, but sometimes it's okay for me to be like, I don't know, and I'm also frustrated, and just hold space with someone and let that rest in the room too. So we don't always have to answer, but I think we need to communicate and speak to each other, and that's what books do.
And I think that takes a lot of courage, right? So all of your portrayals I see them as extremely courageous because they're very realistic portrayals of what's happening for teens today. And they're coming into what I refer to as taboo subjects. This is not stuff we talk about around the dining table, generally speaking. So it becomes difficult to even broach those topics at home. It becomes challenging because we don't think our kids would do that, right? Not our kids. Somebody else's kids might be doing it, or so-and-so's kids might be doing it, but not our kids. And I think we are also living in those bubbles of our own making by denying this, because then we don't allow those conversations like Rene's encouraging us to do, to have those courageous conversations, to hold space with our own kids. I have a off-script question for you, Ashim. Did you let your own 14-year-old daughter watch Class?
No. No, because, and of course, with social media, she was very aware of the buzz around it and the fact that older kids that she knew were watching it. So what I did, which I thought was kind of an interesting sort of compromise, was that I turned it into a bedtime story. So I did a bedtime story version of it, which didn't have all the sex and drugs in it. It was like a much more tame, but also, dramatically engaging oral tale, which I told her every night. Yeah, that's what I did.
Did it start with a murder scene?
No.
Okay, just checking.
Same story.
Same story, but
slightly
okay,
altered.
Fine. Okay, fine. Interesting. Rene, if I could bring it back to you in terms of the YA space, can you share a bit of background on how you came to focus on YA in your work? And tell us about your own journey to sort of throw a spotlight on these issues. For those of you who've not seen Piecing Me Together, I believe it's a Newbery Honor, isn't it? Was
Yes,
that the one?
correct.
It's a Newbery Honor book, and it is fabulous read. So I encourage you all to pick it up and read it. But if you can say a little bit more about your journey into the YA space.
Thank you. So when I was a young person, I didn't have a lot of power, right? Young people, you can't vote. You're not making the rules at home or at school. I turned to art, which for me was poetry, and I was always writing in my journal. I did not know how to articulate this at the time, but I was processing what was happening in my neighborhood, in the world, in my family. And so I think my approach to working with young people is to show them how art can help them heal and process. In my culture, it's more recently it's acceptable, maybe not affordable, but people of color often don't go to therapy, and we don't talk about these things like you just said. And so for a young person to be having all this stuff going on, art can be a way for them to process it. So the character in Piecing Me Together, Jade, is an artist, and she makes beauty out of things that people throw away, disregarded things. It's a metaphor for how she feels. People have kind of tossed her to the side, and she's reclaiming her beauty and her self-worth. And so in every book that I write, whether it's biography, picture book, or realistic fiction, the character is finding their voice through some type of art making, because I think that is a way for a young person to say, this is who I am, this is what I care about, this is my story. I know there are stereotypes about me, but this is how I want you to know me. And so my characters are often saying that in the text.
That's really helpful to know that process, and that it's so deeply personal for you, that you came to it through your own stories. Thank you. Ashim, can you say a little bit more? I know you said out loud that you're not a YA person, but I'm afraid I'm going to beg to differ with you, because you are. You put out class in the world, so you're now officially a YA person too. Can you say a little bit more about how you entered that YA space? And I mean, it's very interesting. These things get a life of their own. I learned that class is actually #1 in Brazil, an Indian serial, right, in Brazil. Unbelievable. Please.
I mean, I was saying earlier today that I was actually a very bad student and quite rebellious, and in a school, in a way, a sort of similar, little bit of a similar school to the one that's in the show. The one that's in the show is like New India, so it's, of course, much richer and all of that. But I did face a lot of, in a way, I was the outsider in school, etc. So there was a lot of stuff that was very personal. When this project did come to me and they said, oh, would you be interested in doing this? I thought this is a really interesting way, and we were just talking about this earlier, is this sort of like, oh, there's this YA category in Netflix. This was a very interesting way for me to subvert these conversations and make something that was like, okay, maybe if they let me through the door, I can make everyone look like archetypical characters in the first 10 minutes of the episode, and then just destroy all the archetypes. So you start with all the bully rich kids and the poor, innocent poor scholarship students. And very quickly you start seeing, well, the poor kids are kind of complicated and they're a bit grabby, and the rich kids are actually not that bad, and everything sort of starts falling apart. So so what you do is you essentially subvert the type, and you start creating people, individuals, human beings, and context and social context, and you start realizing that people are not just good and bad in the world, and they come from an environment, and those environments are determined by parents and what the parents are doing. And we can all sit here and say we want our kids to be good citizens and they shouldn't lie, but then you see the dad on the phone is lying on the phone all the time, and that's what the kid is mirroring. So for me, the show was more than, and I when I say why I think I mean it a bit, in a lighter way, but the idea was, can I take this school and make this a representation of our society now? Like, can it be a microcosm of what's happening in this country at large, amongst all of us together, trying to work together, kind of hating each other, kind of having to live with each other? I thought some of those things were interesting to do.
And I think, what I would say about all of the folks that I'm sharing the stage with, their representations are so nuanced and so complex. Each of them are dealing with very different environments. We're in Portland, Oregon, we're in Delhi, we're in Bangalore, actually, with Jane's work. But they bring up the issues that we think about, like you said, class issues, caste is in your work specifically, but it's so nuanced on how it's done, beautifully done with caste, where you have 3 different characters in one family, a father and the 2 sons, and they all have very different takes on caste. Okay, I'm going to do another show of hands to the audience. Who has actually seen or finish the series. Yeah, I know you did, Rasil. Anyone else who's seen? I encourage you all to see it. You may not want your kids in the room, if I can say that. He doesn't even, 16 plus, okay, straight from the director. But I would encourage you all to watch it and see what's going on. Jane, how did you come to the YA space and what it is? You had a very specific journey that brought you to writing this book in particular, The Midnight Years.
So for those of you who have been reading my work, I have been writing for the age at which my boys were. So I started with picture books, and I've told, my books have been growing, the Super Zero, and then, the ages are happening. But this particular one, this book took us 5 years to write. And I wrote it with a psychologist. So the two of us co-authored this book. There was a very sad reason. About 5-6 years back in India, we had a rash of teen suicides. I don't know if you remember. So there were these young people, when their board exam results came out, and the disappointment and knowing that, they would not get into the places that the colleges they want to, they were going up and throwing themselves off terraces and stuff. And of course, like everything else, other news, something else happened, and this got covered up. So we were wondering what we could do, because we have structures in place, we have schools, we have parents who talk to young people. It's still happening. Can we talk to them in their voices? Can we break down, because teens are notoriously difficult people to talk to, right? We've all been there. They have a constant no, talk to the hand. So we thought we would tell their stories, and this book tells the stories of 4 youngsters in their own words, their own challenges, whether it's a body image or the unrealistic expectations of an over-anxious parent. So it tells the stories in their words.
Yeah, and it's interesting, the choice of craft and storytelling happens. So Ashim, in your work, you have a singular event or a party that's happening, and then multiple perspectives on that event. And that's sort of the same structure that's used in Jane's. You've got a party that happens, and then you've got the multiple perspectives on it, which is really quite fascinating, the way they play out differently in terms of that. Ashim, okay, so this is the moment the parents in the room are waiting for, right? The parents want to know, help us, what could we do now? Okay, we know this is happening, we know that there's issues and stuff. How can parents help teens navigate adolescence, or what you put on the screen? What do you think of the phrase, and it's the phrase I'm taking directly out of your mouth, Ashim, misguided parenting?
I mean, I'm going to speak more as a parent than as a filmmaker, because I think that I have to navigate my 14-year-old. And I think there's no one way. I think really it's like, to begin with, to understand that parents don't really know the answers. We're as vulnerable as the kids. We're as lost in a way. We're as destroyed by social media and as addicted, And I think to sit there and tell your kid, oh, don't do that when you're doing it, I think it's just really unfair. So I think the first thing is just to be vulnerable enough to know that we're finding our way in this new environment, and that there has to be space for conversation. That's something that I feel not enough Indian families do. There's just not enough conversation. There's too many things that are out of bounds. And the out of bounds actually creates a sort of a fetishistic relationship to all the banned stuff. So it's classic. You ban something, you taboo it, you censor it, and it comes back with so much more force. So I mean, my only suggestion is to be able to have conversations. My daughter asked me, why can't I watch Class? I'm like, this is the reason you can't watch it. But you can watch it when you're this age, and that's why. So whether it's alcohol or drugs or sex or whatever, I think, in my opinion, nothing should be out of bounds. Everything should be open, because I want to be the first person to have that conversation. That's really where I'm coming from.
And I think that's really a call for bold parenting, right? It's really a call to parents to say, you know what, it's okay to start to break down some of those internal family taboos that we have, to not address or not talk about some of these subjects. They are really uncomfortable. I understand that. When you have a teen in front of you, you're dealing with their hormones, their changes in their lives. They don't want to talk to us about any of this stuff anyway. And then we're going to try to come in there and say whatever. But it's not a lecture, right? That's the critical part that I hope everyone takes away. We're talking about actually having conversations, checking in with your child and understanding where they're coming from on these very difficult topics. And seek support and help where you can. There are books about this. There are other ways about how online. There's lots of blogs about how to start these conversations at home. Because I feel like if parents don't address it at home, we pretend like it's not happening or it's somebody else's kids that this would happen to. And then I've seen families really blindsided by what their kids could potentially get up to and do. And it's not a nice situation for the parents. And it really comes out of a fear for not wanting to address some of these issues and stuff. So, I turn to Rene. Would you like to add to anything about misguided parenting or sort of what parents can be thinking about to help teens navigate their adolescence?
When you were speaking, I was thinking about, and you too, you said they don't want to talk to us anyway. They might not, but they do want you to ask. Right? And so sometimes it is not about the actual conversation. It is about knowing that someone cares and that someone wants to listen and wants to take them in. So I would say even if they're not, and this is for educators too, even if the student or the child is not responding, we need to keep asking. We need to keep initiating. And then I think, I'm a writer, so I'm going to say read together. I think sometimes we have expectations of our young people that we don't do. We want them to be readers and we want them to be critical thinkers and all, and then are you reading? And are you reading in front of them? Are you reading together? Maybe you can discuss those books. Sometimes it's easier to talk about the characters, right? And what they're going through than your family drama and what you all are going through. But in talking about other folks' stuff, then you can kind of heal your own stuff. So I think sharing a family reading a book together can be a very powerful thing. Asking your child, who did you identify with in this story? Who would you like to get to know more? That gives you some insight into maybe what they're thinking. And then it also models what we want reading to do, which is not just take in a book or a film, but to react to it and to respond to it so that it's not just entertainment, it's actually helping us be in conversation with the world. So I would say model that to your young person.
Yeah, you guys have said it all. But as a parent, again, reacting as a parent, the one thing I think, and I have not got it right, definitely not. Did not even attempt to because it's, a minefield. I use this term flip-flop parenting because we tend to do quite the opposite of what our parents did. So my parents were very protective, and I have let my boys go. I said, I trust you, be independent right from the time they're small. But the one thing I think we may have got right is that we build memories with them. So we're not big on birthday gifts, for example, or things like that, but we build experiences. So I want them, now they're going out in the world, I want them to always think of home as this happy place. And to think of if they go somewhere, they eat something, and to have a linkage back to home. So I think, maybe that's what we all have succeeded in some way in doing.
And dream and laugh together too. We're talking so heavy, the world is so horrible, but there's also, I have nieces, I have young people that are in my life, and I like to just play with them and be silly and make up stories and listen to music and go to concerts. So I'm also thinking about how can we spend quality time and how can we, especially in hard times, dream of what we want this world to be and encourage them that they are the ones who are going to make it be that and empower them in that way too. So I hope that we're also having hopeful and joyful conversations with our young people and modeling how you can be feeling some hard stuff and also preparing for the good that's to come.
Yeah, I love this suggestion to read to your children because we always imagine reading to your children as like a bedtime activity for young, you cuddle at bedtime and read a nice picture book to your child. But actually, that's an experience that can continue well into middle school, and I would say even high school. You could pick up, and there doesn't have to be that age-appropriate, what I call aspirational reading, you know, where you're trying to get the kid into the next reading block or reading level. That's not the kind of reading I'm talking about, where you're trying to push your kid into reading, but really just enjoying a story together. Cuddling, you know, like you're saying, creating small moments of joy where you have that connection and where you're really not talking. Actually, it's good to have spaces where you don't talk. If you want to be super bold, you could grab a book of poetry and start reciting poetry in the mornings to wake them up. I tried that for a few weeks. Neither did it wake it up, nor did it endure my children to me. They all thought I'd gone completely mad. Why is my mother reciting Wordsworth from the door? But it was fun for a while. But there's lots of things that you can do to kind of bring your kids into words, because I feel like words and the worlds of words are a joyful space, generally speaking, and that allowing kids to come into that world. And if you want your kids to be lifelong readers and learners and joyful about reading, you have to be doing it yourself. So enjoy it with them, and it's really a good way. I want to understand from all of you the challenges that you faced in either bringing your work out or once it was published, how the reception was to the work and the issues that you raised, because you don't shy away from things. Each of you really take things on full on. So if I can ask you to say it, and I'm fine with whoever wants to take the lead on that.
So I have had books be banned, and every one of my books have been challenged, censored, or banned in public schools in the United States, in several different states for many different reasons. And so I have been thinking a lot about, why is this happening? Why are teachers or administrators and principals wanting to push these books out? And I think sometimes it is fear. I think sometimes people are just afraid to have those hard conversations. We don't want to expose our young people to harsh things, and I feel like, well, they already are exposed to it. They're already feeling the feelings, so we might as well go there in a safe way. So yes, I have been challenged in my work, but that motivates me. I feel like that is indication that we need to have these conversations. So it makes me want to write more and to be more brave on the page for the young people whose lives are at risk. And quite literally and also emotionally. I'm thinking of who they're going to become at 20, 30, 40, 50, and I want to make sure that if they're reading anything from me, that we were in some kind of conversation that I was hopefully helping them to be a better citizen of this world. So I'm responsible for that. I can't back away or shy away. So yes, I have had some controversy, but I've also had folks say, thank you for giving me a tool, because now we can focus on this character and not the child, and they have conversations. So it's kind of even. For every time I want to cry because someone is banning a book, I get a letter of how it's touched them. So it keeps me going.
And you've had that experience of book bans in your work.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I've had a very similar experience. I mean, you know, class was a battle for me to get out. There was a lot of editorial notes, endless pages of editorial notes, which basically means cut this, remove that. And I was like, no, I'm not doing any of that, or take my name off. So there was a lot of back and forth. And I think there was, you know, to be fair to the platform, we are a country that can get upset and things can blow up and it can become, you know, really out of control. So there was a lot of that. And I just pushed all the way to make it happen. And I think somewhere they said, okay, this guy is not going to let go. And then it went out. And the fear was people will react, parents will react, the parent-teacher associations will file lawsuits, and we will have, you know, mobs outside the office. And what happened in turn was that young people really, really took to the show. And it was just incredible. And suddenly, like, you know, because, you know, this is Netflix, they like metrics. So when they see the metrics go up like that, suddenly the big smile happens and everything is forgotten, so all our battles were sort of forgiven because now this was a super success. But for me, the success really was getting, which I've never had with any of my other work, because it's not been at sort of addressed to this audience. I got the most amazing emails from very small towns all over India. A lot of emails about kids who were able to come out to their parents using the show as a way to have a conversation about, you know, being queer or whatever that is, sitting at a dining table and saying, well, you know, it's just what you were saying, Rene, like this idea of having a character that's not you, and then you ask your parent, well, what do you think of that guy? What would you do if your kid was like that? And then the conversation happens, and then you're able to address things that were not otherwise just being left unsaid. So I think that was really, for me, the true success of this.
Jane, do you want to speak to any of the bannings or sort of difficulties?
May I ask the audience a question? In all, for your kids, in their schools, has anyone seen this book? Any? Yeah. So that's the reason. So because the book has scenes of challenges, of body image challenges, or of drawing boundaries where a girl has to say no. So these are reasons why libraries are just, I mean, so the same thing as you, Rene. The book hasn't gone to the kids whom we want it to go to.
Thank you. So you can hear that there are also challenges in putting out this work and putting out these realistic portrayals of teens and adolescents, because it's not, as a society, people don't want to hear it. They don't want to know these difficulties that are there. And the parents are struggling with trying to have conversations because they kind of know what's going on in their schools or lives and stuff often. Although if you look at the way that parents are portrayed, both Jane in your work and Ashim's your work, some of it's nuanced and some of it's cookie cutter. You know, I forgave that all because I thought, well, for the purpose of plot, we're concentrating on the kids and what they're doing. So the parents were really there to support what was happening to the kids in the work. But we're running out of time, and I just want to, I will open questions to the audience. And I also want to ask the panelists if you could also give some parting words of advice. What do you want the parents or the people in the audience to take away from our session on adolescence? But first, can I just ask, are there any questions from our audience members on what we've had the pleasure of exploring together? What, sorry, I can't hear you. So the 5 minutes is just for us. Oh, wonderful. We've just gained 15 minutes. So what I would invite the audience members to do right now is to think of some questions, because you've got a whole 15 minutes in front of you, a slot that we have to fill up. And then I will close with this, the allowed speaking section with that question of what would you like the audience members to kind of take away, or anything, you know, go wherever you would like for this conversation to go. Rene, you want to start?
So I was thinking about comfort. A lot of times when my books are challenged, it's under the guise of we want our young people to feel comfortable. We don't want them to feel discomfort. And so I would ask all of us to lean into discomfort. And I see it as a good sign when a young person reads a book about an injustice and they get sad or angry. That means they know how to empathize and that they care. And that's a good thing. We should be encouraging that. If a young person is struggling with something and they turn to art to process it, we should encourage that discomfort lies in art making, and that it's okay to put those emotions. Art can be a container for our emotions and for the hard things. And so I would ask all of us to lean into being uncomfortable, because the only way to actually move through that is to move through it. If you don't face it, then you just stay stuck. And I don't want our young people to be stuck. So I want us to push each other gently, but I want you to push them and push yourselves to be uncomfortable a little bit.
Just sort of extending that idea, I think when we get older, as we get older, I think we get more closed. And I think we have a lot to learn from our kids. Sometimes we don't have to always teach. We can also learn. And we can also remember what we were like when we were younger. And I think that's a very interesting window, just in terms of the openness and the curiosity that we might have once had, which when, due to life's whatever, hardships or issues or whatever, you've shut down the windows that you've closed that you could open again through your kids.
I want us all to be less judgmental. I'd like to put that out there, and to set less standards and less boxes. A lot of what I write is about this. So either for our kids, all these books that we collect or all the links we keep sharing as parents about how to raise wonderful, brilliant, perfect kids, or on ourselves, we're so harsh. I have so many conversations with mothers when they say that, I'm just not good enough. I have just done this. I haven't been spent enough time, or I haven't made him into a golf champ. I want us to be just comfortable. I'm sorry, just the opposite of what you're saying. No, but I want us to be happy more and to have more silly times and fun while we're raising children, and be less conscious of the shoulds and the boxes.
Yeah, I think I don't see it as being opposite. I think you're actually echoing each other very nicely, which is to be open to the ways of the world and the ways that the wind blows, but also allow yourself as parents some grace and acceptance in what you're doing as parents. Allow yourself the space to make mistakes, and allow not yourself, ourselves, I should say, to be fully present with the discomfort that can come from some of these conversations. And with that, I'd like to open it up to, I gave you enough time to prepare your questions. Remember, I used to teach, so I'm used to making people say things. Yeah, can we get some mics moving around in the audience, please? Thank you.
Yeah, I think.
Can I ask you to stand?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Siddharth. I have 2 kids studying here at NEU. I think my question is about a topic we haven't discussed in this conversation as much, or maybe not at all, that most of the families today are nuclear families, right? And there's a lot of pressure on parents, and most of the time both parents are working as well, to really groom the child and spend a lot of time with them and just make sure. I think these days, when I compare to my childhood, parents are hyper worried about every small or big thing, right? So how do we deal with that pressure, and I think you said that let's be a little less harsh on ourselves, but practically speaking, everything falls on us, right, as parents. And when I compare with my childhood, it's mostly the mother who used to do a lot of things. These days, father cannot escape, right? And it's a good thing. I'm not really, but as parents, I think we are quite clueless a lot of the times that, and it's not that we had a very bad childhood or unhappy childhood. I think, but I come from a smaller town, and we had a kind of a joint family. We were not living in the same house, but there are a lot of houses where a lot of relatives used to say we could just go out, and nobody would ask us where you were and where did you go and why did you go and all that. Why did you eat and all that. But today we are like in small boxes, and it's like constant focus and like nowhere to escape, right? So that's I don't know if I put it, but I hope you got it. So yeah.
I mean, what I'm hearing you ask about is multiple things. The movement from a multi-generational household to a nuclear family, which is a huge and complex change in our country here. The ways in which we are micromanaging our children, if I could just summarize what you're saying, and the pressures on that lead to pressures on parents, yeah? Okay. I need a mic. Okay, here we go.
Expert on dysfunctional. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to ask you a question. First, we need to define what we mean by success. Each of us wants our children, and the last session I done here too, a few years back, I said, what do you want your kids to grow up to be? And everyone said happy, but that's not the case. We want them to be successful. And therefore, in this FOMO of, missing out something, some class that other kid's doing or some extra. But so if we define, and very honestly to ourselves, and my boys are grown now, okay, one's in college, one's still there. And if I go back and revisit it in the 2020 hindsight benefit that we have, I'll realize that it's not about being competitive. We don't have to stuff their childhood with every possible thing. And once again, I'm saying you enjoy them, let them enjoy you, and they'll find.
That's good. Okay, that's good. More questions from the audience. Wonderful. We've got a hand in the 1, 2, 3.
Hi.
Thank you.
I'm Srishti. I am not a parent, but I'm a secondary school librarian, and I do deal with the young adults and some of the kids. So it's not a question per se, but it's more of a reflection of this entire session. So I guess as parents and as educators dealing with young adults and kids in secondary school, sometimes when we have to have difficult conversations with them, we forget that they're kids, We get hurt by their comments. Because, of course, we too have feelings, right? It's not like we are less human, right? But we have to keep this in mind that they are kids with lesser experience of life than we have. And there's one more thing, the question that Sir asked. To take care of kids of any age, I guess, you have to take care of yourself first. In case you are a happy individual in general, and so you are not micromanaging your life in general, you probably won't be micromanaging your kids' life as well. So, you need to take care of your mental health, physical health, and then I guess you'll be able to take care of your kids as well. Thank you.
Thank you. That's really important for us to say out loud too. I think the adage that I've heard is about putting on your own oxygen mask before helping others. There's a question on the left-hand side at the very back.
Yeah.
There's one here.
So I have two questions. The first question is, how do we ensure that artistic interpretation and representation stays as art and doesn't become sensationalist or token representation, especially when we're dealing with a target audience that is extremely impressionable? The second question that I'd like to add is, how do we ensure that we can keep expanding or pushing our boundaries while respecting others? That's the question.
Okay, now we're getting to the hard questions. Ashim, that one's for you, for sure, the first one.
So yeah, I think in terms of there's no grading representation, right? It's a very subjective and it's a very slippery space. How you respect, how you sort of engage with representation really is determined by your own ethics and your own ability to be an artist. How wide your view is. For example, I think. Like I said, there's no grade for it. I think one of the things, if we're talking to parents, is you have to determine, at least from the point of view of your kids, what you feel is, something that it's validating. You want to validate what you think they should watch or not watch and have a conversation about why, and they might disagree. For example, in my case, there's a show that's very popular amongst young adults called Euphoria, and when I was making class, Euphoria would come up a lot as a reference. And now, personally, as an artist, I love the way some of it was shot. But I felt like it was romanticizing certain aspects of, either the identity politics was becoming somewhat tokenistic, or the drug use was becoming a bit too cool with, what they used to say back in the days of sexploitation, right? Is that you show everything in its romantic glory, and then you show one person dying of something, so it kind of morally justifies romanticizing it. So that's the decision I chose not to do with my work. But another artist might say, you know what, Euphoria was really successful, the kids love it. But I have a 14-year-old who's like, oh, I love the druggy face paint makeup, and she doesn't understand the context. I see that as impressionable and troublesome. So I think it's a really individualistic position. I don't know how you feel about that.
I agree. I think I'm just always asking what else, right? We know the kind of surface stuff that can become stereotypical. How do I make my characters nuanced? How do I really interrogate why they're doing something so that I'm not glorifying hardship? How do I balance it, like we talked about earlier, with joy and not just showing pain and struggle and all of that? I'm just always thinking about my characters and their humanity first, beyond a plot or a story. How do I make sure that these characters are full and thought out and not just a caricature, but a character? You know what I mean? I think that that's really important.
Okay. There was a question here in the front, and there's a question in the back on the left-hand side as well. Can we get the mics start moving towards it so we don't have too much time in between? Thank you.
So I think over the last 5 years at the Neve Lit Fest, there's this bittersweet relationship with age appropriateness. At least that's what I pick up. You know, some people think age appropriate is prudish. Some people think it's banning and it's censorship and all. So I would love to just get your take on what is age appropriate coming down? What was age appropriate 20 years ago is now at 15 is now okay at 10? And why? Or do you think that age appropriateness is not true? You obviously think it is, and I'd love to understand why you think it is when, you know, some people say, well, the world is what it is and you can't hide it and you can't control their mobile internet. So, so what are you trying to do here?
So I think the question that you're asking about 10 years ago, 15 years ago is very relevant because 10 years and 15 years ago, we didn't have the internet in the way that we do. And I think to believe that we live in another time for me is a kind of denial, I would say. I mean, if we looked at the way people lived 100 years ago, 200 years ago, then this question would not be even relevant because we don't ask, how did people live 300 years ago, you know, or someone was traveling by horse carriage, why aren't we doing that now? So for me, that's really the role of the internet in relation to what is age appropriate. Because what you have to understand, I think this is not a good or bad thing. I think that the data companies have made a killing off of sort of pushing things to 10-year-olds that really 17-year-olds should be viewing. It is in their interest to do that. And I think, but in terms of the paradigm that we're in, you know, the old school A for adult movie, I mean, you've got everything available. And in a way, I think it's more up to the parent now to have these conversations, to have these discussions about what is appropriate. And what is appropriate is not a fixed, it's not a static barrier for me. You know, it's like not all 12-year-olds are the same, not all 14-year-olds are the same, and not all adults are the same. So I think just that conversation and the flexibility of that being in the hands of the caregiver or the adult that is parenting someone, I think is more important than a government body deciding what should be seen or not, or a corporation deciding what should be seen or not, because they want to sell everything to everyone. So I would rather that be in the hands of the parent and that conversation be, you know, the age appropriateness be determined by the people raising the kids.
And I would say it's also child appropriate because what works for one kid doesn't necessarily work for the other one. So what my daughter could read and see because she was an advanced reader in the books, I was very concerned about. She's starting to read John Green at an inappropriate time. You know, the kids who are readers get exposed to ideas a little bit early, and that becomes difficult too. So there are questions way back here. There's a lady who has a mic. Please stand up. Is it working? Yeah. Okay, I'll take the question and then Rene, you come in. I'll take the question first.
Is it working? Yeah. So my question is more towards all three, but specifically to Ashim. And it comes from the fact that, you know, my experience working with Ashim in the past in advertising, wherein while it could be a client like Unilever and one would have a very specific brief, but working with a person like Ashim, he would always want to push the needle. He would want to push the bar. He would want you to be, me and my client, uncomfortable because he would want to do something. And how do you kind of do something similar? And the end product would always be like, oh, wow, I'm so glad I didn't go down the safe route and actually bought into, because he would always come back saying, oh, this is the director's cut. And lo and behold, we would always go ahead with the director's cut. How do we create a space for our kids to have those uncomfortable conversations so that they can help themselves, or I can help them push the needle, push the bar, so that we're not kind of putting our blinkers on them so that they come out with average stuff. How do we do that? How do we create a safe space to do that?
I'm going to thank you for that question. It's very important. I'm going to put the strain on our speakers here. You're going to have to listen deeply because we're going to take a bunch of questions at once, and then you're going to all have the last word. The other questions, can we have, there was a question over here somewhere at the back. There's one up here. There we go.
Yeah, hi, this is Anoop here. I've been listening, everyone. You have put the things very nicely, and we are all saying parents have to do this, parents have to do this, and we are all trying, I think. But in India, we say, ghar ki murgi dal barabar. That, someone who is an expert at home is zero for the home members. So, we are all trying. I don't think any parent will say that they are not trying. But children listening to the parents will be zero, and if even a single person outside will say this is good, they will listen to that. So what can we do more, or how we can, are there those kind of workshops for these kids in the schools? We are rather listening, libraries are not taking these kind of books. And if I, as a parent, I will suggest that book, or I'll pick up that book, my son will never listen to me. Whereas a librarian, a teacher will tell that. Why is that not, or how can we encourage that?
That's a very important question. Any other questions from the audience? I saw hands up. There's in the first row, I need a mic, and the gentleman in the green shirt, another mic, please. Someone's here? Just stand up if you've got the mic.
Sure, it's a very short question to Ashim. So, today I'm very cognizant of the fact that a lot of the conversations have to have early. I think what's on my side is that we are at a time when we have enough exposure to, or enough books, etc., which are there to help us spark conversations at home, because the industry is such and it's really growing. We are also, I think, fortunate to be a part of a school and a parent community where we have enough exposure to these books, which otherwise, as a parent, when I'm in the woods, I would not have seen. I think the question I have for you, Ashim, is you talked about having a bedtime class, that you got done for your daughter because she was too young for the content you'd created. Are you thinking about actually creating a podcast or something similar so that other parents, who believe that to a certain extent there has to be moderation of the content that is going to our children, we have access to it? Because if you not thought about it, please do. Would love to, kind of have access to that.
We need a mic in the front row here, please, and a mic back there with the gentleman in a green shirt. Whoever's got a mic, stand up, because I can't see you. Thank you.
Yeah, hi, I'm Neha. I'm not a parent, I'm an educator. I have a question about acceptance. As an adult, we are still struggling to accept ourselves, our body, our mind, what we think, because mostly what we tend to do is we need to accept what others think about us. And in my entire 11 years of journey, I have seen our younger ones are really struggling to accept themselves. Even if we encourage them, we talk to them, the conversation which we have in our class, still they feel that there is something that they don't have. And definitely the competition takes place a major role. When they see other kids doing something better than that, they don't realize what magic they have in themselves, what capabilities they have. So how, as an educator and as a parent, I understand that parents also struggle this to make them accept what they are. You are great, whoever you are. So how we can deal with this and help us out.
Thank you. I'm going to take two more questions. There's one in the front row. Please stand.
So this is particularly at Rene, because I love your very strong female characters. I love what they are standing for. I do notice, however, amongst the young women. Okay, I'm just turning around for the mic. I notice the obsession with beauty, the obsession with how you look, and it really pains me as an old feminist, the amount of time that girls in particular are spending on makeup, looking good, watching tutorials, doing the makeup, and just as a mother, as an author, as a person who has these strong characters, you know, all that time is taking time off what I would think of things where women can make a real difference in the world, and I'd like your response on that.
I don't know if you heard all of it, but it's basically about how do you take a feminist stance, if I can paraphrase this, on girls and take them kind of away from concentrating on makeups and looks and to things more substantive. We have a student on the left-hand side. Please stand.
Can you hear me? So my question was basically about like books that deal with a lot of taboo topics. At what point would you draw a line between topics that make meaningful commentary on these topics versus just content for shock value?
Sorry, can you just say that last part again? The mic lost you a bit.
Where would you draw the line between meaningful commentary and something used just for shock value?
Thank you. So now we turn and give the really difficult task to the wonderful speakers that we've had the pleasure of enjoying this afternoon on stage to have the last word. If I can ask them to have some more mics on stage so that we can hear from. And I'm just going to go in order of where we're seated. So we'll go Rene, Ashim, Jane, please.
So I believe in seed time and harvest. I believe that sometimes we are sowing seeds, and sometimes we're the person watering it, and sometimes we get to actually see the harvest, right? And you will be in different situations with your child or with your children or your students, several different moments. Some students you will be sowing and you're watering these and these are already at harvest. Sometimes you won't even get to see the harvest. You won't know that what you did, the educator over here somewhere, you won't even know, actually will grow up and be the person you were hoping they would be, because they're not going to get the chance to thank you because you've met them in this point of sowing. So I just want to encourage you, the father, the person who spoke about, I mean, this is hard. It is hard, but it is possible to do the hard thing, right? We signed up for this. We said, I want to have this child. We said, I want to be an educator. I want to be a creative person and make stories for the world. So we are in the work. It is hard. You will be frustrated. Lean on your people, right? Find hope, all that. And admit that it's hard. I think all of these questions that just came out, I feel like we want answers, but sometimes the answer is just to admit that life is hard and that we're gonna make mistakes, but that we can give ourselves grace and trust the process of sowing and reaping. If I am consistent over time with the people I love, I will receive a harvest. They will be the person I'm praying for them to be. Something will work out. It might not work out how I want. They might not do the career that I want them to do, but I believe that they could be okay if we allow ourselves to not have the pressure of solving everything right now in the moment. So I would say trust that gardens sprout and that seasons change, and to lean on your people and make sure that you're not trying to do this alone.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how to address all the multifarious questions because there was lots of different ones. So I'll just say that I think we're at a time which is, honestly, from the point of view of someone who makes images, we're at a time of like an all-out assault on our senses from the data people. I'm sorry to say this, but it's a fact. Like your attention has been hijacked. I think whether you like it or not, it's hijacked. And that's the time we live in now. So there is, in my daughter's school, I see cafeterias full of kids on their phones. I don't see kids in playgrounds as they were 15 years ago. I think the reality, we can't deny that. It's been hijacked. That time has been taken, whether it's makeup, whether it's, very young girls being sexualized very early on by saying, oh, you could look like this person, or Disney taking the age of like this, coming back to the age appropriateness, taking the age of someone who would have been, 25 when I was growing up to now 16, and sexualizing someone who's basically not even an adult, and then that becoming like a sort of a mentor figure for young kids. I think the fact is that we don't have control over the material and the images that we're getting. We don't have control over it. And as a creator, one of the things, maybe coming back to this question of when do you know too much is, it's too much. I think as a creator here, I don't want to speak for everyone, but I definitely want to take some control back when I make things. So if I'm working for Netflix, I don't necessarily have to toe the line of what their mandate is. I can decide what I want to do, which I feel, as a human being, is fair, is giving some sort of fair representation, is opening up questions that need to be asked. And it's fine if it's difficult for the data to be accumulated at a fast enough pace. I think it's okay. I think artists and people who are creative should push the boundaries, should ask the questions, and really question the time that we live in, and not take for granted just because that's something that's being piped into your phone, it's something that's necessarily good for you or your kids. And I think if you look at how it impacts us, can we imagine now how that impacts someone who's 5 or 6 years old that's sitting in front of an iPad? I mean, it is an assault, and I think we should treat it as that, So that's my take on that bit.
Jane.
There are two specific questions that I'd like to address. I can't remember who asked one. One is, but the answers are that let's also focus. I think we have too much focus on the darker side, on the difficult bit of parenting and what's going wrong. And what is that principle? When you focus on something, it just gets larger and it consumes you. I think we also have to make time to focus on how, as Rene said, we chose this, okay? And what we enjoy about it. And if it takes making a list of things, actually sitting down and making a list of things that you love about parenting or the things that are going right, make it. Because I think it's worth reminding ourselves when all this media hits you and that about all the things going wrong.
Yeah, thank you very much. What I would say out loud to the parents who are asking about what to do, remember that your kids, as they come into their teen years, are also searching for their own selves and their own tribes. They're at that stage in life when they're going to be pushing you away, and it's uncomfortable to be pushed, and they push pretty hard. And what I heard underneath that question is, I want to be back to being an influencer in my kid's life, because from the age of 0 to really 10, you're the influencer, right? And then starting from 11, 12, whatever, you are no longer the influencer. And by 13, 14, you don't have their attention at all. But they come back. And that steadiness that you spoke about, the consistency of being there for them, of not losing them, of not losing the conversations, that's really hard. And one of the things we heard was about the phones in the schools and stuff. What I would say to the educators in the room, I know of schools where the phone at lunchtime or at break times is actually banned. The kids have to check in their phones in order to be in the lunch space. I mean, it's a pretty bold move. You'd have parents as well rebelling against that. Parents, dining tables, take the phones off the table. Get off the phones yourself when you're at the dining table. Have those conversations with your kids. And these are little tweaks. Have a gratefulness jar or a gratitude jar where you just remember what you're grateful for at least that day. There's got to be something in the day that was good. These minor tweaks, I think, are ways that we all can help to navigate through some of this. I would like to invite each of you to really put your hands together for this remarkable panel and really amazing conversations that we've had, and the amazing questions from all of you. I'm sorry we didn't get to answer all of the questions, but to each of you, please continue your good work. I think what you're doing is putting mirrors up to our society and saying, this is what I see now. And it's uncomfortable for us to see it, but it's very important for us collectively to see what you are seeing and the ways you're seeing. Thank you for all your work.